accounts are. Health savings accounts are accounts that are owned by the employee or the owner of the health savings account. So they're not owned by the company that the individual might work for. They're owned by the employee, and that's a fundamental difference between a health savings account and something called a flexible spending account. A flexible spending account is owned by the company for whom the individual works, and any unused sums revert back to the employer. A health savings account is owned by the employee, and whatever's not used in one year can be rolled into the next year. So you can actually build value in a health savings account. So what does that mean? How do you get money in there? Is there a limit on how much money you can put in there? What do you do with the money once it's in there? Those are all questions that are legitimate questions. Let's try and take them one at a time. So how do you get money in there? So you first have to open a health savings account. And a health savings account has a tax benefit to it. The idea behind Dr. Goodman's work, which is really seminal in the field and important, was that we need to improve and encourage consumerism in healthcare. What does that mean? Consumerism is the idea that I, as an individual, am going to not only interact with, but have a direct relationship contractually with, and pay for directly the goods and services I buy from the healthcare industry. And so that means that I can go to my doctor and I can actually do things like negotiate price, or I can go to a lab services company, or I can go to an imaging company, or I can go to a hospital system. And I'd say, hey, you know what? I think your price of $1,000 or $500 or $100 is too high. I think a better number is half of that, or a quarter of that, or 80% of that. But there's some sort of a negotiation capability that comes about by virtue of the direct relationship between the buyer and seller of any good or service. What Dr. Goodman wanted to do is he wanted to reintroduce that idea into healthcare. Sounds crazy, right? Well, with insurance companies having dominated the space as payers, it's not so crazy. In fact, the reality of the matter is that you don't pay, if you're insured, you don't pay for most of your healthcare directly. Or you pay the insurance company. The insurance company then pays a negotiated rate that the insurance company dictated between the insurance company and the healthcare service provider. Well, that sounds like it makes sense, except for one thing. Who does the provider owe a duty of loyalty to? Who is the customer? Who gets to decide what rules are followed, what protocols are established, what the course of action is for your health? Well, that's a convoluted message and a even more convoluted answer. But let's just go back to the question of pricing and payment structures, and let's encourage, was the argument of Dr. Goodman, let's encourage a direct relationship between the buyer and the seller of the goods or services. So let's encourage consumerism. Let's have patients pay directly for their healthcare services. And let's do that. Let's equip them with the cash to do so. In other words, let's encourage the savings by individuals of money for use in healthcare expenditures. So what happened as a result of Dr. Goodman's work and the Bush administration was the law was passed that said, or the executive order was passed that said, hey, we're going to encourage people to save money to be used for healthcare purposes. Now, to encourage that, we're going to not only create some incentives, but we're also going to create some structure around it. So, first of all, we're going to make those dollars saved, put into an account, have the result of reducing your taxable income. So you don't get taxed on that. In other words, there's a taxable benefit or a tax benefit by you putting money into your health savings account. That's a good thing. In addition to that, any money that you have in your health savings account that you don't spend this year, this calendar year, can be rolled into next year. And there's not a limit on the value you can create in your health savings account. So while the number might be $100 this year, but you only spent $50, you can roll the remaining $50 into your account or keep it in your account next year. And if you put another $100 in there, you're going to have $150 in the account when you start. And that that money is there, and it's not taxed, and it can be used for a variety of purposes under the code, the tax code, that qualify as medical expenses. Now, a step further is you can invest that money. You can invest it in stocks or bonds or whatever you think is appropriate, and the income earned, or the dividend, meaning dividends, or the value that's created by virtue of a sale that's greater than the purchase price, the gain, if you will, all that can be set. It can be retained in your in your health savings account without taxation. Again, you keep the money in the health savings account. As long as it's in that health savings account, it's not subject to tax. And when you spend the money on healthcare costs, it is also not taxed. So these are good things. They're encouraging the right kinds of behavior. They're encouraging consumerism. Now, the other thing that I think is a limitation on HSAs is this notion of economic mobility. So what do I mean by economic mobility? We would hope that people develop skills over the course of their professional lives or their careers or their jobs that cause them the benefit of earning more money one year over another. And at the same time, we recognize that there are instances where people are in families or groups of 4 or more when we are defining things as household income. Some people may be on minimum wage. Some people may have a bigger paycheck than that, and others may not get a paycheck. The others may be involved in something called that we call affectionately the gig economy today. But in Texas, where I'm currently sitting, in order to qualify for Medicaid, household income for a family of 4 has to be a little bit north of $51,000 a year. That's compared to a median income for a family of 4 across the United States of roughly $68,000 a year. It's not too far from that. But the question becomes, as it pertains to HSAs, how do I go from $51,000 on Medicaid to, say, $53,000 and no longer on Medicaid? In other words, what happens when I no longer qualify for Medicaid? So just imagine this scenario. I come home and I say, honey, I'm home. I got some great news. And my spouse or my partner says, terrific, what's the great news? And I say, well, I got a raise. I got a 5% raise this year. And she would say, or he would say, as the case may be, that's wonderful, but now instead of earning $51,000 a year, we are making $53,500 a year, which means we no longer qualify for Medicaid in the state of Texas. Well, what does that mean? That means now we have to figure out how to pay for health care.